You have been definitive, Olivier, in saying we must have the courage to reflate. With the years that you've studied this topic, do we have the ability, led by Jerome Powell, to reflate ourselves out of this low interest rate regime?
I do not care too much about what happens to interest rates. I care about what happens to the economy. And it may well be that we need to have very low rates for a long time. That's not a catastrophe, but on your question, yes, I think we can reflate. I think we can go back, not quite to the old normal, but to something not far from it. And we can probably go there fairly quickly.
You wrote, Olivier, and you spoke at the American Economic Association a year and a half ago, about our public debt. Are we nationalizing our public debt? Have we messed up our bond markets so much with this Fed action that it's irreparable?
Well, on this, we surely disagree. I think there are two issues, the level of debt, and I think we were wise in this case to spend what we needed to spend. And yes, there'll be higher debt later, but it's not catastrophic at all because the interest rates are low. And then on the central banks, they did what they had to do, which is they're not trying to make life nice for the government. They are basically trying to push the economy up. And the result of this is that they have very low rates, which is the right thing to do. And one of the channels is that it makes the life of a government a bit better than it would otherwise. So yes, I think both fiscal and the monetary authorities at this stage in most countries are doing the right thing. I'm not terribly worried.
Tom Keene, can we just confirm that you don't actually have an intern at home, and Mrs. Keene is the one that you tell to go and get the books from the bookshelf?
No, we're very lucky. We were going to do an extern and a virtual intern kind of thing, like a lot of corporations are doing, and we are able to desanitize the house so that we're able to get an intern in.
That's very thoughtful of you, Tom. That is very thoughtful. I imagine HR is going to reach out very shortly to find out what on earth is going on at Casa Keene very shortly. Olivier, it's fantastic to have you with us on the program. Tom's question on debt, I think, is an important one. We have the debt on the official sector balance sheets, and then we have the debt that has increased on private sector balance sheets. I want to pose the following question to you, thinking about the latter and not the former. A lot of companies have taken on a significant amount of debt over the last several months. Olivier, how does that shape your thoughts about how this economy recovers over the next several years?
I think that's one of the issues we have to watch out for. I think it's more of an issue for the small and medium-sized firms. And thereby, some of them should be given a break. I mean, if they accumulated debt because they had cost, even because they were closed, but they still had cost, then there should be a way of helping them out. This could be done by just forgetting some of the debt to the extent that they owe it to the state, or it could be that they may need to restructure, and then the debt has to be, decreased in value or forgotten or forgiven. I think that's one of the issues that we're going to have to deal with. There are going to be many small firms which are going to be in trouble partly because of the debt they had before, but also because of the debt they have accumulated since then. So one of the issues which I wanted to discuss with you is, and one of the things that we have pushed with two colleagues, is the notion that the normal way of restructuring debt, which is a fairly heavy way, may well be overwhelmed by the amount of potential restructurings which are going to have to be done. And so one of the things that we propose is a simpler restructuring process in which at least the part of the debt which is due to the state would be basically automatically adjusted rather than as a result of bargaining between the state, the firm, and the banks. But in short, this is a big issue, I think, mostly for the small and medium-sized firms.
Olivier, let's build on what you're saying on the proposal where there's sort of a mathematical haircut that all debt owners have to take and that companies can just accept into their balance sheets in order to reduce their debt load. What kind of disruption would that lead, given the fact that the holders of this debt are pensions, our foundations, our state and local governments, the fact that this is not a zero sum, it's not that you could just sort of cut one side of the balance sheet and everything is fine?
I think you're right. And when you decrease the value of a debt, you make the debtor better off, but you make the creditor worse off. It's very hard to know how many firms will have to be restructured. When we're talking about very large firms, then that becomes a big issue for the firms which hold the debt. I think here we're talking about a very large number of very small firms. And in many cases, these firms are viable. I mean, if you take restaurants, once the pandemic is gone and physical distancing is not an issue, restaurants should be able to do more or less what they were doing. So what we need to forgive is a relatively small amount of debt. My sense, it's very hard to do computations at this stage, but my sense is if we were to restructure the debt of the small and medium-sized firms which need restructuring, which is clearly not all of them, this is something which is very tractable for whoever holds the debt on the other side. For the small and medium-sized firms, it's the banks, and the banks are, where before the virus came, were in fairly good shape from that point of view. So they can absorb, is my sense, the loss that would come from restructuring the debt of the small firms.
Professor Blanchard, Bloomberg Surveillance has talked to Paul Deguar of LSE, Willem Bouter, of course, about the changes in Europe. We have seen Macron and Merkel really speak about a new unified fiscal effort in Europe. Do you buy it? Are we going to see finally some form of mutualization and union on the fiscal side in Europe?
Yes, we are going to see some form of mutualization and transfers. I mean, the project which is in play will happen. In what form exactly, I don't know. Whether it will come in time to help with the COVID recovery, I'm skeptical. That it will have the form that the people who pushed it in the first place, is it going to have that form? No, I'm not sure. But it is still an enormous first step. It's actually two steps. I mean, what I was hoping for was mutualization, the issuance of debt by the EU in some form, and that's going to happen. But they did more than that. I thought that they would do this, and then they would basically just have each country get its share of the debt, of the proceeds from the debt sale, and go from there. The plan as it is has mutualization and transfers, which is that some countries will get more than their share if they can justify it. This is very ambitious. I suspect the final product, as always, is not going to be exactly what we dreamed of. But yes, I think symbolically it's terribly important. Once a program like this is in place, once the EU budget can, the EU can issue debt on its own and use the money in various ways, very hard to go back. So again, it's going to be very bumpy, but this is genuine progress. This is change.